rumors before that we would want to overstay in power and so on. It is difficult. We are in a country that is difficult to do. The exposure that Kenya is today, the democracy and so on, there are things we cannot do. I'm just worried that maybe we might end up into election when the IEBC is not well prepared. But there are two things involved. One, I want to echo the words of Madam Wakilia, that you cannot critique everything. You cannot complain on everything. I've been, if you can take this to record, I've been in this studio severally, and I've always argued my points on honesty and facts. But at times we do a lot of politicking. That's why I can say when the government is wrong, it's wrong. When it's right, it's right. What happens now for these issues of IEBC is that there are people who will just want to wake up to do anything that the government does, they complain. Anything that the government does, they complain. I want to imagine if Ruto had appointed Charles Nyachai, who has been, it had already trended online to be the chairman for IEBC. What would we be saying today? Maybe even Charles Nyachai was a good candidate, but president was compromised just because of political drama in the country. Let me tell you this. It does not mean that because Charles Nyachai is a friend to president and has been seen taking photos previously when he was a deputy president, he's a wrong candidate. Same way, it does not mean because the current interim chair has a relationship with the staff of deputy president in State House that is likely to do something. Doesn't mean now if by any chance today Hans becomes a leader in this country, my sibling should never get a chance to become anything in this country. We are living in a country whereby we critique everything. We act of emotions, like we are even depressed ourselves. No matter what the government does, we complain. No matter what happens, we complain. So my word today is let's give the IEBC a chance.
The matter is before court. We do not know how the court will.
And that is my second point. And that
will cause a further delay.
And that is my second point, Fred. We have an opposition who are thirsty to be in government. So whatever the government does, they rush to defend it and give all kinds of stories. Secondly, we have people who use such opportunities in government to make money. When anything comes, their asshole is to go to the court and they put a court order so that they're either being paid so that they withdraw the cases. That one does not necessarily have to be the opposition. There are people who they use that as their way to make money. We have opportunistic Kenyans who use scenarios of difficulty to do such things. Like even you will even see when you have when you're a leader and you have somebody who opposes you, if there's any calamity that happens, like if there's floods or house burns, they would want to rush there and show as if they're supporting. And in the long run, to prove that the current government is doing nothing. So we have two ways here. We have an opposition which is trying to fight, and we have a team here that could still be wanting to strain the situation and make money. Like to give you, the other day I overheard a story. I don't have proof of it, but it happens that somebody who is a business person in the government, a tenderer, has won a tender. He wants to be paid, but there is a certain government official who is a CEO doesn't want to pay him, wanted to approve the payment in the finance for him to be paid. What did that guy do? He went ahead and used his money to influence the board to fire him and hire another CEO so that his money can be paid. So we are in a situation that the other situation that happens even beyond the president. There is a lot of gaming in this country. So we have both ends, but at times that information is not privy to Kenyans. So at times they all backstabs at the president. But we hope that this IEBC is given a chance so that at least we have an election in the next few years. The
crisis that we are looking at is an issue of time. That if at all it is demanded that the IEBC, once reconstituted, should also ensure that we do the delimitation of boundaries. At the same time conduct by elections, at the same time do voter registration, and still prepare for 2027 election, that the time will be too short. And therein lies a problem, because hapo ndio kutakuwa na shida. Too little time, too little preparation, then the elections are bungled. Do you share that?
Fred, thank you so much. First, let me say that in the previous elections, 2022, we had IEBC in office about January, then we had elections in August. It was about some few months to elections. if we have intentions, good intentions to have a proper, justifiable and free, fair elections, even if you had IEBC today and do the elections tomorrow, if the intention is clear, we'll just do something fine. You see, all these gimmicks that are happening are sponsored by the government, so that they create an environment where they will have an opportunity to accuse the opposition and say that you are the guys who wasted time. You see that? President William Ruto is determined to secure a second term regardless of what happens, because he has understood that he has seen and listened to the ground and realized that at the ballot he cannot get it. So he is trying to play all gimmicks to ensure that he secures the second term, which unfortunately, it doesn't matter what he does, he will not secure it. We saw recently Cherargei talking about Kenyatta having served 14 years, then Kenyatta the second served 10 years, and then Moi served 24 years, and therefore President William Ruto deserves and must serve 10 years. There is nowhere in the constitution that dictates that a president must serve 2 terms. It only says that a president can serve. I mean, time limits at most 2 terms, but it is not saying that it must happen. So the Kenya Kwanza regime led by the president must first understand that it is not a constitutional requirement that they have to go 2 terms. 1 term is enough, and that's why Kenyans have agreed in unison all the way from Turbo, where the president comes, towards the shores of Lake Victoria, climbing through Mount Kenya. They are saying that this guy must go 1 term. What I'm saying, you see, IEBC has a budget of about 61.7 billion. That was the proposal. This budget, about 15.3 billion is allocated for issues around the voter registration and acquisition of election technologies. But we have to be clear, away from just saying that IEBC is in court. Is there intention to ensure that this money is released so that IEBC, when it comes to office, it can function? Because this is also will be a crisis. The IEBC budgeting will be another problem. If you look at that budget, 25.4 billion is designated for electoral operations and logistics, and that's where we get problems when it comes to ballot printing and transportation of voting items. That's also a crisis that is looming. We have 21 billion reserved for post-elections activities and finalization processes. I'm saying all this so that Kenyans can understand that all that we are having today, issues around IEBC, are state-sponsored. He has mentioned something around Nyachai and my gentleman Electoral. You see, we cannot let it slide that Fred is my friend, and then I've been given an opportunity to decide who becomes the chairperson of a serious commission like IEBC, and then I appoint you. Even if it was Hans in the opposition, he could have raised a concern. Angesema sasa, what's happening this? But let me tell you, let me give Kenyans hope. It is not an issue of the chairperson or the commission. Kenyans have decided. And remember, we are going to register about 5.7 million new voters, fresh, who have never voted. And this is a category of young people who had never interacted with the political process before until Gen Z happened. So their first,
once we have IEBC.
Let me just say, their first political experience was to reject President William Ruto. What tells you that even Ruto puts himself as the chairperson? These people will not reject him at the ballot. So what we are saying is, we, as opposition and as Kenyans, we are focused on ensuring that we mobilize properly so that people turn up and vote. And remember, whatever is announced at the polling station, that is the results. Whatever gimmicks that happens at Bomas, it just happens because the chairperson cannot take the certificate to the candidate's home. That's why we converge at Bomas. So as I finish on this, whatever is announced at the polling station, that will be the results. And I want to tell you, even in Turbo, polling station where the president comes, he will not defeat anybody.
And it's good that you read that budget, the 61 billion. And if you look at it, there's no provision, I think, for delimitation of boundaries. Yet the matter is already before the Supreme Court. IEBC itself seeking an advisory opinion because the lawyer for IEBC feels that failure to conduct the delimitation of boundaries could actually lead to an invalidation of an election, yes, which is a real possibility. If at all the Supreme Court actually declares that's true, then this same IEBC, once constituted, will have to undertake delimitation of boundaries within the same short time. Don't you think that in itself is a crisis, that we simply do not have time for all these things?
This is definitely a crisis, absolutely. There is no other way of putting it. This only spells the word crisis, because these are exercises that need to be carried out and need to be carried out before the election. For instance, there are so many things that are pending given the fact that the IEBC is not constituted. There are wards and constituencies that are not represented because the IEBC cannot carry out a by-election, and that is a great disservice to the electorates and of that area, those areas that are not represented. I would also want to maybe mention the fact that some judgments, although I come from, I associate with that arm of the government, the judiciary.
An officer of the court.
Yes, as an officer of the court. There are some judgments which, when given, will respect, but give very sweeping declarations, and you wonder if they really held the public interest in deciding as they did. So that said and done, we'll wait to see what the Supreme Court gives, because it's a matter that is before the court, and we'll obviously abide and follow through.
Now that you see that there could be a crisis in the making, do you foresee a possibility of us having to extend the date of the election?
I don't think that's an option. I really do not think that's an option. There will be a lot of politicization of some of the exercises that need to be carried out. And for instance, the delimitation of the boundaries, I'm not so sure if that is an exercise that will actually see the light of day.
But the argument, according to lawyers, is that failure to do it could actually invalidate an election. And that's a worry, that you may go into an election without having done that, then the election you're told, no, it was invalid.
Yeah, that is a very valid point, and we'll be here waiting to see how everything will play out, because there was no reason, none whatsoever. There was no delay for the IEBC to be constituted at this point in time. It could have been done earlier on, but it has been done now, and there are petitions before the court, and the judgment has been issued as it has, and now the matter is before the Supreme Court. But before we move away from the question of the elections, there are some very reckless statements that were issued, and I would not be happy if I left this show without mentioning these. Questions surrounding elections are very, very sensitive, and I would want especially to speak about the 2008-2007 post-election violence, which has been referred to by our former deputy president, and he has referred to, if at all there will be any the election will not be free and fair, then what will happen at the time will actually look at the post-election violence from 2008-2007 as a Christmas party. That was a very, very reckless statement. And in the event, for instance, there is a discrepancy in the election, there are other channels. We do not resort to violence. And I thought maybe at this point in time, 15 years later, 16, 17 years later, we would have learned that we do not go for violence. We do not go for our neighbors. We might not like who the president will be elected will be, but we have to let him lead our country. As a country, I feel like we should reflect on healing as a nation from that event, because it's an event that left scars and wounds on almost every other Kenyan, even those that were not there at the time and are learning the history of the nation. It leaves them with a lot of...
Yet there are those who argue that what you say is tantamount to saying that we should not look back at our history and learn from it.
We should.
Because you're being warned that if we do something wrong, we could revisit that. Do you see it that way?
No, I don't see it that way, because I think every person who actually loves their country, if you love your country, you will not want to see us there. And the thing about the post-election violence, it didn't just start with that announcement of who the president was and who had lost. It's a conversation that was building from the point of the 2005 referendum, the conversations and the reckless statements that were issued by the politicians and the leaders at the time. That is what slowly fueled people to see that it is actually okay as a person from this community to even kill a child from another community because they are not from our community.
Yes.
It's those conversations that need to be held accountable so that we do not find ourselves where we were.
Castro, as you talk about IEBC, you'll also get to give your final comments because we are getting to the end of the show.
Yes, of course, I agree with Wakili that, issue of election is very emotive. And it is high time that we observe the high integrity and even our entrances into the public. But we cannot forget our history of where we came from, that this country, democracy has been built through bloodshed. We gained our independence through bloodshed. But you don't want to shed the blood of our brothers and sisters in the same blood in our own soil, because we are interested in maintaining the status quo. Status quo has to be challenged. And this is what the Gen Z are doing. They are challenging the status quo. You see, the leadership vacuum in the IEBC that happened in 2023, it has, of course, has hindered critical electoral development into this country. The electoral activities that ought to have done has not been met. Say voter registration, delimitation of boundaries, preparing for the 2027 elections. It is a high risk to get to an election when we haven't resolved the issue of border delimitation. Because as you said, getting to these to elections when we haven't been able to solve out this border delimitation, of course it is challengeable in a court of law, and we don't want to a case where citizens will defeat this Ukura regime, they defeat the William Ruto regime, and then William Ruto would rush to the courts to of course, challenge the elections, irregularity and validity of the elections in the issue of border delimitation. So we have to, as citizens, it is in our own initiative. We take our own initiative to ensure that when we are getting to the electoral process, we are getting to the elections, we have already dealt with any backlash that we might foresee in this process. Border delimitation is one. The other thing that IEBC that need to deal with is public distrust, because if it is something that is be hectic for IEBC, it is not even in the constitutional crisis, it is in the general public, the public distrust. You can imagine only that 1% of the Kenyan voters believe that the former elections or the elections that have been done were free and fair. We have a contesting 69% that believe elections have not been ever free and fair. So that public distrust, public confidence, they have to build that public confidence. And by doing so, of course, it is by making initiatives that are pro-constitution, making initiatives that are pro-people, because the constitution guides the IEBC on the electoral process and every process that you have to undertake. Okay. So we have an issue, we have a crisis, but it is something that the IEBC need to handle. Of course, we need a country and an IEBC that even today can stand up and disqualify William Ruto, because he is not even eligible to vie for the election again as a president. He is a man who have justified that he cannot even maintain the integrity, accountability and transparency and the tenets of chapter 6 of our constitution. So if Kenyans would feel that this man is not eligible for the election, he is a man who would not come nearby to a ballot paper. So that is something that also the IEBC will have to deal with.
Thank you, Castro.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Just about 30 seconds.
Let me make it brief and say that the constitution is very clear that the elections are supposed to be done on the second Tuesday in August of every 5th year. And that if I do my calculations very well, then it tells me that Kenya Kwanza regime led by President William Ruto and the entire regime of MPs who voted the finance bill while young people are being shot on the streets have got only 811 days to quit offices. That translates to 19,464 hours, which gives us 2 years, 2 months, and 18 days. So, Kenya Kwanza regime, President William Ruto, and his cocoons of guys who do not listen to Kenyans, they have that time. I've made it public. They'll decide what to do with it, and they'll decide where we'll put them after they shall have lost elections. But the truth is on the ground, and it is black and white. Kenyans have given up in this government. Kenyans have given up in William Ruto. Kenyans are saying one term is unstoppable.
Clock is ticking. Hans.
Very interesting. You know, I admire the energy of Babu and his articulations. But you know, when I listen to the way Babu hits on the government, and he's the DAP youth leader, he forgets that his party leader was was a CS for Kenya Defense, and he left a pending bill of 60 billion. If you go and do a research on the scandal that was left by the previous government headed by his party leader, you'll run. But anyway, that said aside, you know, at times it's sweet to fight the other government. When your issues are brought out, you'll go. And also I want to also be happy now Castro is saying, you know, Castro supports our former deputy president. And he forgets that our former deputy president used to do a rambase also. With the same money he said he stole in the government.
I do not support, he's not even speaking for the election. I
support
lastly, Kenya.
Just,
you know, I'm a Kenyan and I support my nation state, Kenya.
Just to give my final comment is, you know, all these issues that we are discussing here today, we would rather discuss honesty and facts because election time is coming. People who went to the street last year are GNCs, not the whole, not the WUs, not those who have been in government for many years. And I foresee the GNCs who are with us discussing everywhere we go, radio stations, TV stations, are supporting the same people who have been in government. Mm-hmm. And I want to tell my friends here, if people who are supposed to fight, if people who you are supporting to be in competition with President Ruto are those who have been in government before, will be shooting your feet. Right. You rather get a GNC who runs for president, then we now discuss. Get us a candidate for us who are supporting President Ruto, get a party, get him to election. Then from now, you can even convince some of us who are young, maybe against President Ruto, but you cannot convince us to go to Rigathi or to Eugene or Amalwa or wherever who have been in government. All right. Get us somebody who's fresh, who we can now compare with the
I'd
current
like to give Wakili a minute for your final
Yes, I've listened to the ground and I have had one term and I've had kumi bila breaks, but what matters is the Kenyans are going to make that decision. It is not me, it's not anyone on this panel, but it's the Kenyans and they are talking. So not everyone is saying one term, others are saying kumi bila break and very excitedly so. So as Kenyans, let us call ourselves as advocates to advocate for peace and stability for this nation because those are very crucial elements for our country's progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wakili Wairimo Gatasha, advocate of the High Court. Gakuna Njima Castro, political analyst, Hans Rop, also a political analyst, and Ken Babu, National Youth Chairperson, DAP-K. DAP is
CN.
Democratic Action Party. the only party where democracy is in action.
Thank you so much for your time at TV47. After the break, we switch gears and talk matters. Remember, it is a Feel Good Friday, so DJ Granite will be in studio in a short